Thank you for joining us in worship. Our special guest this morning is Korista Lewis-Beaty, and she is a pastor in Texas, close to where our daughter lives, actually. And Korista has something to tell us today from the scripture about following Jesus.
I'm going to tell you a story. It's the story of two brothers. They were born to a father who was very wealthy. And one day, after they had grown up, but they were still at home, working their father's land and working in their father's vineyards, the younger son decided that he did not want to be a part of what was happening at the farm. He wanted his inheritance, and he wanted it now. So what does the father do? His son is literally saying, I wish you were dead, because I want all that is owed to me. The father, unlike me, gives his son his inheritance. All that he would have inherited upon his father's death at that moment was given to him. And this son goes away, and he squanders that money and that inheritance. It says in the story that he uses it to party, to indulge in all the pleasures that he could think of. But the inheritance is quickly gone. And once it's gone, he finds himself literally feeding the pigs and eating what the pigs are eating. And he comes to himself and he says, I should go back to my father and beg him to give me a job. Beg him to take me back, not as a son, but as a servant. Because the servants in my father's house, well, they eat better than pig slop. And so the son goes home. And upon coming home, way down the driveway, he sees his father a long way off, and his father runs to him. His father doesn't even give him a chance to apologize. He wraps his arms around him. He lavishes him with kisses. Remember, this son was with the pigs. But this father loves him so much that he doesn't care about how gross this son looks or smells. Can you imagine it? He loves him so much that no amount of dirt, no amount of shame, no amount of offense could keep him from loving on his son. You see, this is the same son that had said, I want my inheritance, I want nothing more to do with you, and abandoned his family. Basically telling his father, I wish you were dead. Can you imagine how that father might have felt? Doesn't feel good. But here, the father, who is the one who has every right to be offended, is not. He throws himself around his son. He holds him. He hugs him. He tells his servants, go, get a robe to clothe my son. Go, get the ring and put it on his finger. He was lost, but now he is found. Let us throw a party. Let us kill the fattened calf, and let us throw a feast for everyone around. Go and tell my neighbors, this son of mine that was dead is alive again. And the young son felt shame and guilt. He wanted to beg and grovel and plead, and the father wouldn't allow it. The father just welcomed him home, restoring him, not to the place of servant that he was going to beg for, but restoring him to the place of son, the one that he had abandoned. That is a beautiful story. And you've probably heard of it. Some people call it the prodigal son. Jesus told this as a parable. But there's one other person that we haven't talked about, and that is the older brother. The older brother who did not ask for his share of inheritance, who did not go to his father and say, I wish you were dead, but had faithfully served his father the whole time. And when the son comes in from working in the fields that day, and he sees what's happening, he asks one of the servants, what is going on? Why are we having a party? And the servant said, haven't you heard? Your brother has come home. Your father is throwing him a feast. Now, this older brother, who has every right to be upset, he refuses to go in to the feast. He refuses to go in and see his brother returned. He refuses to celebrate with his restored family. And so his father comes out to him, and he yells at his father saying, I have been here and you have given me nothing. You have not even given me a fatted calf or a lamb for my friends and I to have a feast. And yet this son of yours that took everything and left and wished you dead, you welcome him back? I can't celebrate that. And the father says, you have been with me always. You are my son, and everything that I own, everything that I have is yours. But we should welcome back and celebrate the returning of that which was lost. In that parable that Jesus tells, I think often we think of ourselves as the young son. We think of ourselves because we have sinned, because we have run away, because we have, often many of us have, denied God, the Father. But I look at that parable now differently. I said yes to Jesus when I was very young, and throughout my life I've continued to say yes to him. I've continued to ask him to forgive me, and I've continued to serve him. And as I've done that, I've realized one of the hardest things for me as a follower of Jesus who wants to look more and more like him is to welcome home the lost brothers and sisters who don't look anything like him. Those who've spent their days and their time living for themselves. Those who are gossiping or lying or cheating. Those who are indulging themselves instead of denying themselves. And even though I don't want to admit it, I find myself in the older brother. When someone comes to the table or comes to our community, I unfortunately have the reaction of, well, you haven't lived for this. You haven't lived for him. Or you need to. You ever found yourself there? To come to Jesus, you need to do A, B, C, D. Because he needs to know you're serious. And that is not Jesus' answer. The Father didn't even allow the young son to apologize before welcoming him with so much grace that it was overwhelming. It overwhelms me now. And why it overwhelms me is because in Matthew 22, 34 through 40, Jesus is speaking with the Pharisees, and it says, "But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees with his reply, they met together to question him again. One of them, an expert in the religious law, tried to trap him with this question. 'Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?' In verse 37 it says that Jesus replied, 'You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength.' This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. Let that sink in for a moment. The two greatest commandments are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. When I think of the prodigal son and the prodigal father and his older brother, I think about this command that Jesus gives us. What if the older brother had demonstrated the love that Jesus was talking about? What if the older brother had invited more people to come and celebrate that his brother was alive, that that which was lost was now found, that his family was being restored? I can't help but think how beautiful that would have been, how fulfilling it would have been for the father to see his older son reconciled with his younger son. And so when I hear Jesus speak and say, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, and your strength, I think, okay, that's what I'm doing. And then I'm convicted because he says the second is equally important. Love the Lord your God. And the second, love your neighbor as yourself. If I had been lost, which I was, when I was lost, I needed the grace of the Father lavished on me. When you were lost, you needed the grace of the Father lavished on you. And we also needed our brothers and sisters to welcome us in, even before we apologized, even before we fully recognized the immense grace and love that God had given us. We need each other. You see, the commandments that were given to Moses are all about relationship. And that is what Jesus is about. It's about relationship. The relationship of us to him and to the Father and to the Spirit, and our relationship with one another. And so in your community, we are called, you are called, to have an attitude of inclusion. Your motto says, we don't care where you've been, we care where you're going. And that is what the father was saying to the younger son. I don't care what you've been doing with all that money that I gave you. I don't care where you've been. I don't care that you smell like pig. I don't care. I love you. And I want you to come to the feast. And so we are called to this love that doesn't judge, this love that does not condemn, this love that does not shame, this love that celebrates, this love that invites, this love that embraces. Because once we were lost, but we are now found. And our friends and our neighbors, the person who sells us our groceries, the person who drives us around, the person who opens the door for us, the person that we wave to, the teacher in the school, our doctor, our friends, our neighbors, our parents, they need the invitation of Jesus. And that invitation comes through you.